Hi everyone, and welcome at already the sixth Ask Me Anything for StartupLeap. We've had some great guests in our Ask Me Anythings in the last couple of weeks, and today we're gonna have none other than Janneke Niessen. So I'm gonna see here already.
Oh,
All right, perfect. That
hi.
was quick. Hi, good evening. How are you?
I think yes, this is better. I'm good, and you?
Yeah, same here, same here. Thanks so much for joining us this evening.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, perfect. So I was just introducing the Ask Me Anything for this evening. So we've had five Ask Me Anything so far, ranging from the CEO of Fonda to a lot of very successful and great knowledgeable startup founders. And as I was saying, this might actually be one of my personal favorites. So again, really wonderful to have you. So in the meantime, while we get started, a quick reminder to everyone who's already watching, feel free to post your questions in the chat or post them on Slack, and then Johan will get them posted here. We'll get your questions answered along the way. But first of all, Janneke, if I look at your LinkedIn profile, I just keep clicking the link that says show five more experiences. I just keep clicking and clicking and clicking. And I know from personal experience that, at least from what I know, it started with improved digital. But, please correct me if I'm wrong, because again, the
No, I
list goes
had
on
a
and on and on.
yeah. No, I
But
had a
if you
complete
had 1 minute
before.
to pitch yourself, what would you do? How would you describe yourself to someone who even doesn't know you?
Well, the very short version is entrepreneur turned investor, and the slightly longer version is that I'm a serial entrepreneur, tech entrepreneur. I'm a diversity advocate in tech. Uh, I do a few boards, and I'm now a founding partner of CapitalT, a seed fund.
All right, awesome. So, and you were actually voted, or at least announced the Bazaar. Sorry, what's it called? Harper's
Harvard
Bazaar Women
Bazaar,
of the Year.
yes,
I
that
mean,
was a cool one.
that's a big thing.
Yes, it is. No, that was a really cool
How
one.
did
And
you find out?
well, they called me. Normally,
Yeah.
for a lot of awards, you have to, of course, join the awards. But this one, they
Hmm.
called me and they said, "Oh, we have a surprise. You are a finalist," and then I was also a winner. So that was a really cool one.
Nice. Okay, so what does it mean in practical senses to be the Woman of the Year?
I run the world, and no, I'm kidding. No, what it means is, well, that you for that year you are the assigned role model. In my case, for the business category, and I'm trying to do well. I always try to do a lot of things to give back to the entrepreneurial community and the business community. So yeah, the same now. And the good thing with Harper's is that it's a broader audience, so you can have your message heard more broadly than just in the tech world.
Nice. Yeah, so you've been a diversity advocate for years, and now recently, of course, with Capital T.
Yeah,
So I can imagine you have a very broad sense of, okay, what is successful and who is successful and why is someone successful.
yeah.
Are there some, let's say, common denominators of what you've seen over the past several years?
Well, I think that's also one of our focus points, of course, of Capital T. But in the end, it's really the team that makes the difference. 10 people can come up with the same idea, but in the end, it's also down to execution. And one team is really good at it, and the other team just isn't. So it's really, I think, a team is the number one thing.
Hmm.
Also, a very important thing is timing. So if you have a brilliant idea, but the timing is just really off because society is not ready for your idea, then it's also problematic. But I still believe that team is really crucial.
All right, so what makes a great team?
Yeah, so that's not one formula because it has to do a lot with the team dynamics, of course, as well. But there's a few things you can look at, like personality traits and more the hard skills, the human capital skills. So do people have startup experience, failure experience, industry experience? And the more soft skills, as you can imagine, from entrepreneurs, are they stress resistant? Do they have perseverance? Those kind of things are super important. And you need to have a lot of passion for entrepreneurship because, well, as you know, and I think also the people that are watching know, being an entrepreneur is not easy. It's the best thing there is, but easy is not a label you can assign to it. So you need to really love what you're doing because the chances that you won't succeed are quite high. And so then it's best if you really enjoy the ride.
All right. And then you mentioned timing. And I mean, how do you influence timing?
You don't. So no, because that just happens. You cannot. So you need a little bit of luck there, combined with the right vision, of course. So, I mean, if you're totally off timing wise, then that also has something to do with the way you can predict the market from going. But sometimes you just make the wrong assumptions, and people are not ready.
Yes. So a lot of let's say advice that you read on the internet is about following where your customers are. So you mentioned having a vision. Like, how do you balance, listening to what your customers say and going forward in what you believe where the market is going?
Well, it really depends on what you're doing. So, are you talking? Okay.
I'm here again.
If you're creating a whole new market, you can't follow your customers because you are creating customers. If you are trying to disrupt a current market, then there's already customers, and you need to make sure they switch to you. So it really differs on what kind of company you have.
All right. So as I mentioned, there's a lot of written about these kind of topics. People giving advice. One of the questions from the audience is, what is the worst advice that you've heard over the years?
Oh, the worst advice. Well, the thing is, you get a lot of contradicting advice, and so one person says this, the other person says this, and that, and then you're like, okay, what am I supposed to do? And in the end, I think it's really important to trust the data and your gut feel as well. In a lot of cases, there's no right or wrong. And I think having been an entrepreneur myself, entrepreneurs are quite stubborn, and they always think when they get advice very often, oh, this doesn't apply to me. And and some things you just have to figure out yourself. I've made many mistakes that people warned me for, so I know what it's like. But the worst advice, I don't remember.
There's no one piece of advice that stands out.
Well, there's one piece of advice that I think is ridiculous, and that's I've always had female co-founders, and when people say, "Oh, you really need a man," I think that's horrible advice for many reasons.
You can guess from my response that I completely agree on this sense. You're now a partner at CapitalT, of course. One of the founders. Another question from the audience is, what typical business model would you, or at least your team, not invest in?
We would not invest in something that's not scalable. That doesn't mean it can't be a good business. It's just not what VC money is used for. We would not invest in hardware or biotech or life sciences, and that's not because we think it's a horrible business, but we think it's a specific kind of business that you need to know a lot about, and we don't. Plus, the timelines are really different from software. So you would need different investors with a different mindset on how long it will take before returns kick in. So that's what we don't do. We don't invest in all the horrible things that are on the planet. But I think to mention what we do invest in, we do invest early stage, so really early seed. There must be more than just an ID.
What are your ticket sizes?
100K to 2 million. So it can be pre-revenue, but there needs to be some sort of traction, and it doesn't need to be a lot all the time. We did invest in companies that only had pilot clients, and we just believed in the team and what they were building. Then we invest in companies that solve a real problem, which for us means it must be a must-have. Have international potential and obviously a great team, and we proactively look at 5 verticals. So that's education technology, digital health, climate tech, future of work, and what we call the new social. And
and what is the new social?
Well, I think we now have discovered that that's not the current social media is not a net positive to the world, but there are ways to make it better, or a totally new way of social media. So we did invest in a social media network in the US that's based on audios and synchronous social, but we also invested in an app that gives you more control of your own online experience, and now focuses very much on online harassment. And we invested in a company that focuses a lot on privacy and data and having more control, but also use of your own data that's currently in a lot of silos with the big tech companies.
All right, so we're diving a little bit into the specifics, of course, of how you work as a VC. Especially for those tonight watching. And again, just a reminder, if anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat or on Slack. We'll get your questions answered. But about VCs in general, can you briefly explain how it works? Like, where do you get your money from? How do you convince those investors to invest in your fund? What type of startups do you work with? Also, as I just mentioned, what's the average ticket size? So, what are the percentages of shares that you go for? Those kind of things.
Yeah, so we get our money from other investors. They're called limited partners. And in our case, that's a lot of individuals, so entrepreneurs that have been successful, like Corinne Vigreux, she's our cornerstone investor. And then
the co-founder of TomTom, of course.
Yes. And then there's a lot of other entrepreneurs that invested in us. One of the founders of Adyen, Optiver, many, also Marcel Wanders, the designer. So really great group. And then also institutional money like de BOM. De regionale ontwikkelingsmaatschappij Brabant. And for us, we are really happy to also have institutional money on board, because that gives an indication for other institutional investors that we have gone through this due diligence and passed it. So and we pitch our fund like I would pitch my company. So really focus on why we're different, why we are going to be successful, why we have the best team to make this happen. So in pitching, there's a lot of similarities. I think in daily life for entrepreneurs, they have a much tougher job than we.
And why are you going to make this? Why specifically you for this fund? Why are you going to turn this into a success? What do you tell the investors?
Well, we have a great combination of backgrounds. So I have an entrepreneurial background, so I really know what it's like to be an entrepreneur. And Eva, she has a scientific background and also investment experience. So we have a great combination. Well, we have a model to evaluate entrepreneurial teams in a data-driven way, so we can much better predict whether a company is going to be successful or not. And plus based on the way we present ourselves and the way we're in the market, we get really diverse deal flow. So we tap into a lot of founders that the other VCs don't look at.
Yeah, nice. I can imagine that to be, one of the, let's say, from a marketing perspective at least, one of the best decisions in positioning yourself as a fund. I can also imagine that either you as a person or not necessarily.
Well, it's not just marketing, because we really believe, and otherwise I wouldn't have
of course,
for diversity for the last 10 years. I really believe there should be equal opportunity for everybody. And for us, it's really not more marketing. I think it's more opportunities that others leave on the table.
Yeah, okay, I can imagine that. Yeah, so one of the questions in the audience is, what has been your best investment? So that can be financial or personal or let's say anything that you invested in, either time or money or whatsoever. Do you think has that been your company itself or the oh well, you answered it already.
Yeah, no.
I can imagine that gave you some opportunities for other topics.
Yeah, no. So far, investment. That's some other investments I'm doing and I've been doing, but they need a bit more time to get to that point. But I think you will never get as much as a return as with your own company.
Okay, so here's a question from the audience, especially related to this topic. So as a woman, do you feel it was harder to convince investors?
Well, yes. But we did get the investment and that's great. So we did, we were able to show that we were worth the investment, but yes, I'm afraid.
Okay, and do you suggest female founders to take that into account, or do you just say just push forward? Or
no, you should definitely take that into account, because then you can use the situation better. So it is proven that women get questions about the past and men about the future. So if you would answer those questions, then you have a really different conversation. You talk more about things that have gone wrong, or things you've changed afterwards. While if you talk about the future, you talk about your vision. So if you are aware about that, then you should turn those questions about the past around into an answer about the future. So I think some things need to change on the investment side, but until we're there, you should definitely make sure that you act differently in conversations, because it's the way to get there. Just be practical.
Yeah, that's smart. So I also can imagine, you're a VC, and as you mentioned, you also invest other people's money, so you have to think about the financial returns. Yes. Do you also look at the societal returns, or related to sustainability or those kind of topics?
Yes, so we are looking for companies and founders that want to make this world actually a little bit better. But in the end, we look at the financial returns, but also believe they can go hand in hand. And we believe that you can make the biggest change when you actually have a commercial company that also makes those financial returns. So, yes.
Yeah. All right. So can you give us some examples of the startups you've invested in with CapitalT, for example?
Well, the first company we invested in is WiseNose, and that's Internet for Education. So the current internet is too complex for 70% of the people worldwide, children and adults. And it's optimized for advertisers, which doesn't make it per se suitable for education. So if you're looking for something about Vikings, you get the ice skates, office supplies, movies. And all these things are not suitable to use in an education environment. So what they do is they select those sources that are suitable for education and assign reading levels. So when you're 7 years old, you get different sources than when you're 25. And,
okay, smart.
Yeah, and they are scaling big now in Asia and the Middle East. So great company, great founder, and we're super proud investors.
Nice. Sounds good. So this one's well, both applicable to me and to you actually. So I'm very curious to hear your answer about this from Rosaline. What kind of questions do you ask during an interview with a founder?
It depends on the deck, but what for me is most important during a first conversation, that you feel the founder is passionate and really knows a lot about the topic, and you just are like infected by their excitement. I think that's super important. If the meeting is like super dull and you're like, okay, then that is a sign that they are like this also when they're with clients. So, and you try to see if they're just super nervous, but most of the time that's a really important indication. And you see a lot of these articles also online. Oh, this deck, with this deck, this founder raised 10 million without meetings and things like that. But I think it's never about the deck. It's never about that one slide that you should include. It's really the vision you can bring across, and maybe some traction you can already show. I think that's just the most important. But I will, of course, ask about the team and where they see the company going.
All right, perfect. So here's another one from the audience. So they keep asking questions, so that's very good. To everyone who just joined in, feel free to ask your questions and we'll get those answered for you. Here's one from Nicholas who says, you mentioned climate tech as one pillar. Can you give some more details what that kind of tech falls under that for you?
Yes, so it's important that for climate tech, there's a lot of hardware as well. And that side we don't do. So it's really the software side that leads to a decrease in CO2, that makes certain processes more efficient, so it's more environmental friendly.
All right. So another follow-up question, just to get those from again from Nicholas answered. Have you been involved in or invested in startups with open source business models?
Well, we did recently invest, but we still have to announce that, and we wait for the founders to do it, because they are still preparing their official announcement. But a large part of what they do is based on open source. Yes, and they have a super interesting new setup of the company, also with regards to their shareholders. So as soon as that's announced, we can talk more about that.
Okay, well, perfect. Okay, so here's another question. So how involved do you get with the companies that you invest in? Is it purely financial, or do you provide other type of support?
Yes, we do provide other types of support, but our level of involvement really depends on the founders. I've been a founder myself, and I think it's very important that they are the ones running the company. But I also know that when you can get support on strategic topics and strategic moments, that can be really helpful. So we have a very experienced CTO who can support our founders on data and engineering side. And for example, if you negotiate contracts for the first time, then it's quite important to know what to look for with vendors and how to negotiate an SLA, because that can actually kill your company if you do that wrong. We have somebody on the product side, on story, and on diversity and inclusion. But again, our founders really decide how much of involvement they want.
Okay, so do you have some advice to founders that are, let's say, backed either by angels or VCs as to how should they approach the relationship with their investors?
They should be super clear on where the boundaries are for them, because sometimes they just say yes to everything. And every help that is offered, because they find it difficult to say no. But the time you spend with somebody that isn't going to increase your revenue or isn't going to make your company better is actually a waste of time. So really be clear on where the boundaries are. I think that's so important.
Okay, that's good. That's good to know, and that's already, of course, in the situation that you already have investors. Of course, we all hear the numbers that it's difficult to find a VC, especially in the Netherlands. The other hand, VCs say it's hard to find investable startups, but maybe that's a discussion for later. Let's talk numbers. Like, how many, let's say, pitch decks do you get? Like, how many meetings do you then get, and how many investments eventually turn out from that deal flow in your VC fund?
Well, I think we get between 200 and 400, really depends, pitch decks a month.
Oh, wow.
I think we speak to between 10, 15, 10, 20 entrepreneurs a week. Wow. And since February and now we've done 5 investments, and we're going to hopefully do a 6th one in the next 2 weeks.
Nice. Okay, so that means you let's say in 6-7 months, you've seen around 2,000 pitch decks, and you're doing 6 interviews or 6 investments from those.
Yeah.
From all those pitch decks.
Yes.
Okay. So, what are, let's say, have you ever, are any of those 6, were they from, let's say, a cold email or a cold approach or those kind of things? And if so, how did they stood out?
Let me think. They were not, well, one was actually that we are hopefully going to do was through a cold email. So that can still happen. I think you can read enthusiasm through an email, and you also see when people just copy paste. And if it says "Dear Sir," I don't think they were supposed to email me. So, yeah, it stands out when it feels like they tailored the email to you, even though a little bit, and it's just enthusiastic and not like 2 pages. It's very difficult, but also important to be able to say in a few lines why your company is awesome. And yeah, and I think also it's different for every VC, but that makes it horrible for entrepreneurs because you have no clue what people respond to. But at least I think it's important to investigate the things they tweet about, the type of investments they do. If they've just invested in a competitor, chances are quite slim that they will invest in you. So that there is signs, and we also get a lot of pitches from people that are in categories we don't invest in. So yeah.
That's learn about the VC before you get in touch.
Yeah, also for your own good, because it's not nice to be rejected. It sucks, and it's also a waste of your time. So
yeah, absolutely. So I've also read, and this I hope this is true, because I read that you use, let's say, a data-driven technology to support you in your investment decisions. Is that true?
Yes.
And if so, how does that work?
Yeah, so Eva, my business partner, she did her PhD in economics at Berkeley in San Francisco, and she looked into what makes a great entrepreneurial team. And based on her PhD, she developed a model that we use to look at the companies we invest in, because a lot of decisions these days are still made based on gut feel. And a lot of VCs, they say team is important, but they're really vague about what that means. And then a dinner with the CEO is not the same as a team analysis. So we really look at things data-driven, both the soft skills and the hard skills. And then you avoid that you fall in love with the deal. And actually the signs are not that great. And you forget that the team has to do it. So yes, we're super data driven.
Okay, nice. Yeah, I can imagine, that of course with Eva's background, but still your personal history, working with different VCs and as an investor yourself, I can imagine that you can't turn off the gut feeling that you've, let's say, created along the years of what makes a great team or not.
No, but gut feel still contains a lot of bias. And we just say we overlay our gut feel with data. So then you can also see when you're wrong.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. That's smart. Yeah, you have to be strong. I can imagine. To go against your gut feeling.
Yes.
Another topic, and that's another question from the audience. I guess where you have to be strong is Fablink says or asks, you know, a lot of lawyers tell them that an investor should sign an NDA, but she also heard that investors don't sign NDAs. What's your opinion on NDAs?
We don't sign them either,
Yeah.
because, and I don't think it should be necessary. So at a certain point, you can ask for an NDA when you're in DD, but when you're not comfortable sharing certain things, you shouldn't. And I think as an entrepreneur, the worst thing you can do is keep what you thought of for yourself. You need to share it with a lot of people because you need feedback to make it better. And I don't know a lot of entrepreneurs that ended with the idea they started with. They made a lot of iterations, and you can only do that with feedback. And VCs are one way of getting feedback. So yeah, I don't know any VCs that signed NDA just to look at a pitch deck. If people ask me to do it, I always say, please only share what you can send me without an NDA. And when we get further in the process and you want to really show me secret stuff, then definitely send me an NDA.
Yeah, because I can imagine, if I recall correctly, you have quite a technical background. Am I correct?
Well, I think real tech people would say no. I've always been more on the product side, so really in between the engineering, data, sales, and operations people. So I know a lot of the technical things, but I'm not a coder myself. But I do know what is possible and what is not. So it depends who you ask if they think I'm super technical or not.
Oh, that's very honest. Well, at least, you know, as you mentioned, you know, and moving back to the topic of diversity, of course, in the last several years, and probably even longer, you're a very active advocate for, you know, female CTOs, for at least women in tech. Can you tell us, or share your opinion about, you know, what are some of the reasons why, like, the numbers are this low?
Because they don't hire them. That's the number one reason. And when they hire them, a lot of companies are not very inclusive, so people leave again. But I think what is really important that we already start really young by showing children what it's like working in tech and all the things that are possible. Today, when kids make decisions with regards to their education, they're still quite young. And that's the age where a lot of girls think that tech is boring, difficult, and that they are not capable of it. Well, you ask them, do you want to work at Instagram or Snapchat? They say yes. Yeah. But that's working in tech too. And you don't need to per se code. There's so many things you can do in tech. And yeah, I think it's important to keep an open, all the doors open, so you can make those choices still later. But that's also why I think we should have coding and digital skills already in elementary school, because from a young age, because then it just becomes normal, and there's not going to be a difference between boys and girls that much. So, but the thing with diversity in tech is that it's super important, and it's important because it's the only way to create inclusive products and services. And it's important to make sure that the wealth that's created within tech is not just for a small group of people, but for a lot of people. And there's just not one silver bullet, but hiring women, hiring people of color, that's already a good start, and that's already where it fails. And
so that's already for people in power, or at least in that sense, you know, think about other audiences than you would usually look at.
Yeah, and I think we have our own fund now, and people say in VC, oh, we can't find women, we can't find people of color, you just can't find them. Well, we had a job opening, we had more than 600 people applying, and at least half of them were women or people of color, and they were amazing candidates. There were too many great candidates for us to choose from, so I don't know how people cannot find them.
Yeah, talking about the early stages, I remember a couple of years ago that you actually, I think you co-wrote a book, or you wrote a book
No,
for those early
yeah.
days.
Yep, I published a book for young girls, and it's
Mm-hmm.
about a girl that learns to code, builds an app, and then starts a company. And a lot of it is based on my own experience. So the good things and the bad things. So she gets sued,
Yeah.
she gets hacked, her servers crash, she has no money, she has to go on holiday without Wi-Fi, all these things that happened in my life too.
Yeah. And still do, I can imagine.
Yes. Yeah.
Nice. All right. So another one that I saw on your LinkedIn profile is that you're an ambassador, or at least advisor to Codam.
Yes.
And the following up is another question from the audience. Should tech skills be learned at university or online? Or there are so many great courses available out there. So
Yeah.
why is Codam such a great organization opportunity? And how do you look at this topic in general?
Well, I think Codem is super important for a few reasons. First of all, it's peer-to-peer learning, and it's much more focused on the things that are necessary today than in a lot of places, because you easily teach something that's no longer the language of choice. So it's peer-to-peer learning. I think the interactive element of actually talking to other people and explaining them how to do things is super important to learn better, but also for your mental health. I think we all find now in these COVID times how important interaction with real people is. Also, for Codem, you don't need diplomas. So there's a lot of people where the current education system is not really suitable. And not because they're not smart, but just because being in a class for 8 hours a day is not matching their personality, and or many other reasons. And with Codem, you can be hired based on your skills and your ability to learn. So and your motivation. So I think a lot of people get opportunities that who don't get opportunities in the current education system. You also can be there for free. You don't need to pay. There's no limit for anybody to be able to finish that school. So I think even though there's a lot of free things online, it doesn't necessarily mean that people know where to start, that they actually work best when they're on their own. So I think that might work for some people, but not for everybody.
Yeah. All right. Cool. So we can go on for hours. I mean, there are so many interesting topics to discuss with you. Again, thank you very much for being here this evening. I still want to touch on one specific one. Also, several years ago, you started with Inspiring 50.
Yes.
It's an initiative, I think, that started in the Netherlands and now is launching in several countries, I think across Europe. So can you tell us a little bit about what Inspiring 50 is and what you're trying to achieve with that?
Yes, well, with Inspiring 50, we wanted to make female role models more visible. We all very much look up to entrepreneurs like Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Larry Page, Steve Jobs. But there's also a lot of women out there that do amazing things. And you need people that look like you to be able to believe that you can also do it. So if she can see it, she can be it. And to make sure that more people actually saw those role models, we wanted to make them more visible. Also, so they got invited more often for interviews in the media, to speak at events, to make it like normal to see 50-50 men and women at events and people with different backgrounds. So that was the goal of doing that.
All right. So in the past, around 40 minutes, I think I've shared a couple of things that I think are great about you and what you've done so far and what you're currently doing. However, every week we ask our speakers about their biggest fuck up. So there must be things that you've done wrong and things that you've learned from. So I'm very curious to hear, okay, what are the things that our audience tonight can learn from you that you thought, okay, if you can prevent this thing from happening, or if you focus on this, then your future is going to be so much easier.
Well, I think first of all, it's very important for everybody that they do realize that everybody makes a lot of fuck-ups. So there's no success without a lot of ups and downs. And it might feel different because in the media, you mainly read about the successes, but please know that everybody goes through a lot of shit. I think 2 fuck-ups that I think cost a lot of money and that we made was, well, we hired people that we could afford. And I think you should hire the best people. So especially when you set up a new country, that first hire decides a lot about other people that will join, clients that will join. So you should really hire the best person for that role. And if you can't afford the best person, then you should wait and not settle for less. The other thing that cost us a lot of money is opening too many offices at the same time. You can easily feel that you need to be the first mover, but the first mover can also be very costly, and the sense of urgency is very often not as high as you feel it is. So it's best to open one country, focus really on that, make sure that's up and running, and then move on to the next, instead of opening in like 3 places and divide your time and your money and have like an outcome everywhere.
All right. So just to summarize, there's a lot of possibilities. Talking to people is way better than asking for NDAs everywhere. Make sure that you have a great team. It's very difficult for a VC to notice you, but stand out with enthusiasm and make sure that you surround yourself with the right people.
Yes.
Perfect.
And just
all right.
reach out to us.
All right, that's perfect. And how can they reach out to you?
Via LinkedIn or hello@CapitalTVC.com or Janneke@CapitalTVC.com.
All right. Thanks for sharing. Again, thanks for your advice. Thanks for being here this evening. And to everyone who's watching, have a great night. And we'll see you again next week.
Thank you. Bye.